What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the Nobel Del Mar Racing YouTube channel. If you missed my first video where we introduced my EG hatch, go back and watch it. But today, I'm pumped to introduce this car to you guys. This is not another EG video. Today, we're going to talk about this. No, but in all seriousness, I think if I were to think, realistically, this car right here is my favorite Honda chassis. Now, I said realistically, so I know the S2000 and the NSX and the Integra Type R, EK9 Type R, a real EG6. I know all those chassis exist. So, again, like I said, realistically, this is my favorite chassis. And honestly, overall, this is my favorite Honda chassis. I love these cars to death. This one right here is the third one that I have owned. And they've got a racing history that, many of you may not know about. So let's get into it. Now, I know a lot of you are probably like, Nobel, that's an Accord. Like, for the love of God, it's just an Accord. But it's way, way more than that to me. And I realized that after the first time I actually drove one of these CD5 Accords. That being said, this car specifically is, for the most part, stock. There's nothing too crazy that's been done to it, or nothing too crazy that it needed. So let's get right into it. The first thing this car needed really badly was a tune. Now, this is an F22 B2 engine, so that's a single overhead cam 2.2 liter engine. And it actually has a camshaft in it. It's got a Delta 272 regrind cam in it, and that's why it needed a tune. It's pretty choppy at idle on cold start, even with the tune, but once it idles up, it smooths itself out. And when I first got it, it would barely idle. Sometimes I'd have to hit the gas pedal to, keep it idling, and I got it home that way. But once I got it home and I actually got to driving it, I was able to tune it on the street, and now it is a much better running and driving car, and it's definitely streetable. The first thing that I want to dive into that's been the biggest issue has actually been the fuel system. So this car originally came with the 240cc injectors. They were off of eBay. Again, that's what it came with. And they were just like an OEM rebuild fuel injector, which is fine. But after driving it for a while, it started acting funny. So we went and we got ourselves a set of RDX injectors. Now, these are 410cc injectors, and they have been doing a phenomenal job. To put these injectors in this car, I actually had to use the K-Tune top hat. So these were listed for B series, but they also fit this F22 rail, and I believe an H series rail. And then I had to get these adapters for the bottom half. Now, these I got off of KS Tuned website. but I believe they are made by Roscoe. The other thing that I had to do, because these RDX injectors with the top hat were significantly taller than the factory injectors, I had to kind of rig up this little threaded rod, and then I've got a lock nut down here, and then another nut right here. So with this nut, I can adjust the height of the fuel rail and basically put in any injector that fits. And then these lock the rail down onto that nut. Everything's got a lock washer or is a locking nut. This is the nylon locking nut. These have, the serrated flange on the bottom to lock it down on the intake manifold. So nothing has moved. It's been this way for a couple months now, and it's been driving really, really well. The other thing that had to get replaced was the fuel pressure regulator. We now have this fast fuel pressure regulator on it, and it's been doing a phenomenal job. The base pressure is set to around 48 to 50 psi because that's what these RDX injectors call for, if I remember correctly. And it's just been pretty stout. All of our fueling issues have basically been solved at this point. The other thing that was done, if you look down there, you can kind of see that the fuel filter is right there, and it's actually a Dash 6 inline fuel filter. It's a Russell filter, and then all of these Dash 6 hoses are Russell as well. So I converted everything over to AN lines and moved the fuel filter from way down there where it usually is by the prop valve for the brakes, and I moved it up to right there, and it's all just Dash 6 connections, which makes it much, much easier to change in this chassis. The last thing that we had to do to get the injectors working properly was delete the resistor box. So this car comes with a resistor box from the factory, which is that guy right there. And the way we delete it is you basically cut all the cables on the side of it and you splice them together. And what I did was I actually went to the junkyard and I actually found another resistor box on an Accord and I cut the cable off of it. So my original connector to this resistor box is still on there. It's just tucked in underneath and made to look like it still works. Now with this, I can just plug it in here. See if I can do this with one hand. There we go. And then I take my wire here and then I can tuck it down in there. And then put the connector back on its bracket. And then there we go. It looks factory, but no resistor box is being used. It's basically just a placeholder. It might get removed later. Last but not least, for the fuel system, we actually have a Deechworks, I believe it's a 410 liter per hour or LPH fuel pump in the tank. That is, yep, so there's the part number. It's this one. It was already in there. It was installed by the previous owner, but that is the fuel pump that is fueling this whole thing. And it has been working really, really well. If I were to have a complaint, it doesn't bother me at all. The only thing that I would say that a normal person would have an issue with that fuel pump is that it is a little loud. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it, but let's see. Don't know if you hear that. But let's go to the other side of the car and see if we can hear it there. Actually, let's see. I don't know if I'll be able to turn the key. Should be able to get in it though. Here's the interior. Just nice, clean, stock Accord. Let's see if we can hear that fuel pump again. There it is. Like I said, that might be the only thing that somebody, if more of a normal type of person that was looking for a stock car, was looking at getting a fuel pump and put that pump specifically in it, it is a little on the loud side. Doesn't bother me at all. I actually like it because it lets me know that my fuel pump is working when I turn my ignition on. So, with that being said, let's move on to one of the other things that I have done on this car. It's actually the brakes. So if we look there, we've got a drilled and slotted rotor. I believe it's a power stop rotor and pad is what I went with. And they are tucked behind an actual Integra Type R wheel. So some of the Integra Type Rs actually had a 4-lug pattern, but it's not a 4x100 like your Civics and your Miatas and things of that nature. That is actually a 4x114.3, which is the same lug pattern that like Nissan S13s used and S14s. Any of those, S chassis Nissans used that 4-lug bolt pattern. And it's actually pretty hard to find wheels for. I've been looking. I might go with a set of Vors SP1s, but we'll see. I'd love to go to a 16x7 or a 17x7 and get the tire size up, because right now we are at, I don't know if you can see that, but that's a 185/65 R15. That being said, it can still hook its way around the corner and still stays planted, which is one of the reasons I love this chassis. These are even snow tires, and it just stays planted, and I love it. Now, the coilovers that are in there, let's see, might have something to do with that. I do need to get this car a little lower, but like I said, I want to get the wheel and tire set up a little bit more finalized, but that's something that we'll do in the future. So what I was going to say about the brakes is that's a drilled and slotted rotor, but it's also a rotor over hub. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, originally these cars came with a rotor that was like this. So this is a captive rotor, meaning you have to remove the entire knuckle, and then on the back you unbolt the wheel bearing from the knuckle, and you either have to hammer it, or if you get lucky, it'll just slide out. So if I flip this guy over, you can actually see the wheel bearing. And then sometimes you got to press that guy out. Sometimes you got to beat it out. You just have to get it out, and then you can flip the rotor back over, and you unbolt these 4 screws on the face, and then you can finally take your rotor off, which is really annoying. I didn't want to have to do that every single time I wanted to change out brakes. You can change pads without having to do all that, but to change the rotor, you would have to do all that. So what I did is I got the hub off of a 1998 Acura CL, and the 4-cylinder variant of that car actually uses a different front hub, and it's a rotor over hub, more like your traditional front brake setup. And I put all of that onto this. So it's got Acura, 1998 Acura CL rotor and wheel bearing, which is easy to replace on this, not pressed in, not pressed out, because like I showed you on that one, it's just 4 bolts on the backside. So the wheel bearing is pretty easy to do in this. And now the rotor is easy to do as well. I believe it's the same rotor that's used on the 1998 to 2002 Accord that came after this as well. Now, if we move over to the back, and like I said, you know anything about these Accords, the LXs, which is what this is, originally comes with drums in the back. There's one of the drums right there, or the cover for it. I have taken the rear brakes off of an EX, which is rear disc, and put them on this car as well. Why? Because the drums were worn and I didn't want to replace it with drums again. So we went ahead and did a rear disc conversion here, just like you would do to your Civics and whatnot. Aside from that, there are minor cosmetic things that I did to the car after I got it. Like I swapped out the headlights for these black housing headlights. It had those old school like halo one-piece lights, and I just wasn't a fan of it, so I put them back to this stock style black housing light. It already had the clear turn signals, which I like. It's got the clear marker or corner light right there, and it has clear side markers right there. It also had like an old school style tail light, like the Euro clear style tail lights with the red circles. And I just wasn't a huge fan of that either, so I went and I got a stock set of taillights, and I'm much happier with that. As I said in my previous video, the goal for this car is to hit about 200 horsepower naturally aspirated. Why naturally aspirated? Because everything that I've had before this, I've boosted. So We're going to do something a little bit different, and we're going to keep this one naturally aspirated, and we're going to see if we can get to 200 wheel horsepower with this F22B2. No, I will not be H-swapping it. I will not put an H22 or an F20B into this car. I want to keep it single overhead cam, and I want to keep it, as original as possible, because to have a reliable track setup, the least amount of things that we can change and make some one-off weird bespoke part, the better. So if I blow that F22 up, I can just get another F22B2, slap that cam into it, and then we're ready to rock. The most I might do is get another F22B2 on the side and then build that engine when I'm done running this stock F22B2 with the cam. The only other thing I would do to this setup right here is change the valve springs and do a little bit more work to the valve train to see if we can get higher than 7,000 or 7,200 RPM, because that's about where this thing will hang in its stock form. So if we get a different set of valve springs, do a little bit of valve train work, and I do a little bit more research about the bottom end, because this engine does use balance shafts. I've got to see how high I can spin those and what they're actually balanced to and whatnot. Because I'd love to hear what 8,000 RPM sounds like in this thing. I just need to do some research and know if it's capable first. I don't think I've heard of anybody doing it with a stock bottom end. I know people have built the bottom end a little bit and have definitely hit 8,000 RPM with no issue. With all of that out of the way, we can move on to the racing history of this chassis. So this chassis, the 94 to 97 Accord, the CD5, was actually used in BTCC and JTCC racing. In JTCC, Japanese Touring Car Cup, I believe is what it is, and the British Touring Car Cup, so over in Europe, they had a little bit different style of car, but it was still an Accord. They had a lot of really, really neat things that were done to the chassis and the engine for that matter, that helped them excel in racing, because they already had a really solid handling platform, and all they did was improve upon it. There we go. And for the engine, one of the major things they did, it was either an F20B or an H22 base. I want to say it was an H22 base engine. That's what it started life out as. And they actually made it into a reverse flow head. So the intake was actually on the front of the engine, like a K-Series, and the exhaust was on the back. And it was very, very interesting. And underneath all the ducting and whatnot that they had on the front end of the car was an ITB setup, individual throttle body. So that helped the car get as much air as it needed into the front of the car. And it was ducted, so it was just really forcing, that nice, cool, fresh air into that engine. With all that being said, the other thing that they did to the drivetrain was it actually had a sequential transmission, and the shifter was in kind of an odd place. It wasn't down, next to the driver where you think it would be. It actually kind of came out of the steering column and looked like a turn signal switch or a weird, looking wiper switch or something like that, and you would hit it forward or hit it back, and that's how the car was shifted. It's pretty interesting to look at. Let's actually insert a few clips here and pictures of those JTCC Accords. I really love the way those Accords look and how they perform. And I really want to get this as close as I can to one of those. Realistically, again, I know I can't make, well, I could make a full-blown race car in this garage, but I want to get it closer to that, at least looking like one of them for real, because I love the way those things look. So with all of that being said, I am kind of, having to take a shot in the dark sometimes when I'm working on this car, because this platform is no longer really supported by any big aftermarket companies. I think BC Moto did some things for the back in the day. Delta did the regrinds on those cams for the single overhead 2.2 liters. The H22 still has a pretty good following, but as far as the F22 and the Accord chassis itself, there's really not a ton out there. So the things that I've had to do to this car, I've kind of had to look at part numbers and compare them, take measurements, and figure it all out on my own so that I can actually develop this chassis again the way that I want to. I'm really hoping that maybe, who knows, it'll become popular again. And then, aftermarket companies will see their potential and then start producing things for them again. But there's just things that you can't get for this car anymore. Like the header that's on it, I haven't taken it off because I can't find another one. The bottom half of that header is just demolished. The diameter of the tube is probably half of what it should be because, like I said, this car was lowered and the shocks were blown. So the bottom end of the car, specifically the header, which was the lowest point, it looks like, took an absolute beating. The exhaust on this car is pretty much the stock diameter. It's got a vibrant muffler on it, but that's something that I put on because the muffler that it had actually ended up falling off. So when I got home, I welded that vibrant muffler to the end of it, did the best that I could, and that's that. It's a little loud, but there's nothing wrong with it. I hope to remedy that and get a full exhaust on it, find a new header, open it up, and actually get this thing flowing the way that it should. Once all that stuff's done, we can retune the engine on the street and then, maybe at some point get it on the dyno and see what it's putting to the wheels. Well, we'll have to see if we hit our 200 wheel horsepower naturally aspirated goal. So there are, a few other things that I have done to this car. So the things that I have added is, I don't know if you can see it down there, not really, but the Acuity part number, I believe, is 1917. It's for an 02 to 06 Acura RSX. So here it is. Yep. So the part number is 1917. They are the solid shifter bushings because this is cable shifted. That's a cable shifted car. It doesn't have a linkage like your Civics and your B series and D series cars and your Integras. It is cable like a K series. So this part number right here actually does work on the cables for this car. The other thing that does work is it has the hybrid racing heavy duty detent springs in the shifter, and it's got, I think, like an eBay Weapon R short shifter that I've added out of a Prelude, I think is what it is. I had to do a little bit of modifying to it, but it works. And that short shifter actually came with all the spare parts that are up there that the previous owner gave me with this car. And props to the previous owner for documenting and actually having all of these spare parts for the car. They've been an absolute lifesaver. So once we get the exhaust flowing really, really well, and it's not, crushed to half its diameter underneath the car, and it's got an opened up 2.5 or maybe even 3-inch exhaust all the way to the muffler to the back, we're going to also see if we can do something about this intake. While it's really nice and this is a really neat old school, part to have, I don't like that it's down there in front of the wheel because you hit a puddle that's too big and you're sucking up water. So what I want to do is, if you look down here by the battery, you can see that there's a bracket there, there's a bolt there, and there's another bracket up here that the intake manifold is actually using. So my thought process was, maybe I can make some sort of box for the air filter up here, move the air filter to this location right here behind the headlight, and maybe do a little bit of ducting and actually block this area off from the engine bay, and maybe seal it on the hood a little bit so that once the hood is closed, all of this actually seals. And then maybe we can also get some good intake temps from that. The other thing that I would like to do is eventually get rid of this distributor. And I would love to use the DigiDizzy system. Got to save up for that. Right now I'm paying for the wedding and a honeymoon because we're getting married this year. So it's a little pricey. So once all that's said and done, then I can devote a little bit more time and money, a little bit, like I said, more time and money to the car and actually develop it the way I wanted to. So then I can maybe invest in the DigiDizzy for this car, and I actually want to put the EG on that as well and get rid of the distributor because I'm tired of these things. The box right there actually has probably 4, 5, 6, maybe 6 distributors combined from this car and the Civic because I kind of had to put them all together to get one good working one. These are nearly 30-year-old parts. We've got to move on to something better. So I would love to use the DigiDizzy, which allows you to use a coil on plug setup, and it just makes it so much cleaner, so much more reliable, a lot easier to, go to the parts store and just get a coil off a more modern vehicle, put it on there, a coil pack, I guess I should say, and put it on there and keep on rocking. Instead of trying to find these 30-year-old distributors and making sure you get the right one and making sure your plug wires are all still good. And the coil packs just provide a much stronger spark. So in the coming videos, I do plan on, turning some wrenches on the cars. I don't think the EG or the Acura need anything right now. Well, they need an oil change. Both of those cars have an oil change coming up. And the Accord actually has an exhaust leak that I need to fix where the header meets. So the header's a 2-piece header. It's got a top half and a bottom half, and where they meet, there's a gasket in there. And this is maybe the 4th time it's blown out. I think something's bent or warped on the mating surfaces. I'll try to clean them up as best as I can again and see what happens. But I think something's not right there, and it keeps causing the gasket to blow out. I've put the, perforated type gasket that comes with the header in there. I've put a multi-layer steel gasket that I made myself in there. And then I've put, now I've got a copper gasket that's on the way. And hopefully that takes care of it. But yeah, that's what we got coming up. We're going to start turning some wrenches and seeing what we can do. I think that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. So if you've watched up to this point, I just want to say thank you because I know this is probably a lengthy video. I'm super passionate about this stuff and this chassis specifically. So once I get going, it's kind of hard for me to stop. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. And if you want to see more and see what happens with this Accord and with my EG, please like and subscribe. If you want to be notified when I post a video, hit that bell icon and keep racing.